Hello and welcome to The Stack. On this week's show, we speak with Lindsay Peoples, editor of The Cut and New York Magazine. Plus, Monocle's executive editor previews the March issue, and I talk a little bit more about Monocle's very own travel publication, The Escapist. Enjoy the show. From Midori House in London, this is The Stack, 30 minutes of print industry analysis, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. We start the show on a very good note and right in time for the fashion weeks in Milan and Paris. Lindsay Peoples is the editor-in-chief of The Cut, the online publication that is under the umbrella of New York Magazine. Excitingly enough, The Cut now has its own print edition, covering the usual mix of fashion, beauty, politics, sex, and celebrity. To talk about the success of The Cut and about their new spring fashion edition, here is Lindsay with more.
When I started back at The Cut, a lot of my early conversations were just about building on the foundation of The Cut and how do we really maximize and think differently about the impact and influence of the brand. And I think that that's come to life in a lot of different iterations and a lot of different avenues. But for me, the thinking was always, how do I make The Cut part of your group chats? How do I make it the thing that you're constantly sharing and talking with your friends about? Or it's the thing that you're DMing to people and saying, I'm jealous of, or I hate this. And that's totally fine either way. And I think that, even to this day, I still tell a lot of people who work on the team, like, I want there to be a moment in someone's day where they're thinking, I haven't read The Cut today. I need to read The Cut. I need to see what they're talking about. We're one of the few publications that still really has a live blog and is also talking about a lot of things in the world. So, we're covering the executive orders from Trump, but we also have Bad Bunny on the cover. And, we launched a new rubric in this issue called Cut Family Album, and just talking with different family members together with Jessica Simpson and Ashley Simpson Ross. And so I think the print has just been an avenue of us just expanding our footprint and the moments that we can meet people. And a lot of times I think we are just churning with the daily news so much on digital that it also felt like some things, in order for us to do it well, we just needed a little bit more time and space. And it's a really beautiful magazine, but it has so much substance. And I'm incredibly proud that we've been able to do this.
And I want to focus on fashion in particular as well, because I think you cover fashion in such a fresh way, I may say. And I've been noticing that the whole brand, not only The Cut, but New York as well, is covering more fashion because it is an important industry, employs a lot of people. I mean, it is big. We're talking about these huge brands. What is your approach when it comes to a fashion story to make it The Cut?
I think that we're always looking for, what is hiding in plain sight as far as the conversations around style. I think that, we obviously participate in the fashion industry. I go to shows. I'm about to leave soon for the shows in Europe. And I think that, we have great relationships with the brands and industry, et cetera. But I think we're very concerned and focused on how does that trickle down and matter to someone who doesn't have a purview into fashion and doesn't really know all of these things. And so I think that you see that come to life in a lot of different ways, right? So in the issue, Chantel Fernandez, one of our great features writers, she did a reported piece on Keats and like the popularity around this brand that, has ads everywhere. You get on Instagram, you're always being served a Keats ad. And what does that mean for the state of everybody's talking about quality over quantity and they're selling cashmere and caviar at the same time? But I think for us, it's like having a lot of those conversations is so key because it is industry, but it also is part of, the decision making and how everyone chooses how they get dressed every day and what brands they buy and what designers they interact with. There's so many interesting characters in fashion that we like to talk about and highlight, but also we recently relaunched a lot of our beauty columns and started a few new ones. And so I think that conversation, just beauty has been, I think, taken over a lot of fashion conversations as well. There's, a million celebrities with beauty brands at this point. And so we want to also just engage in that to say, we want to be able to be an authority in those spaces, to try the products, to say this is worth your money or this isn't, to be able to talk about aging in a responsible way. And I think that fashion overall has always been important important to us, but I think that we've just now done so much, both Cut and New York Mag, to really have an authority in the space.
You mentioned, of course, the European fashion shows, Paris Fashion Week is coming out very soon. And I wonder, is there a plan for, the Cut and New York Magazine as well, perhaps to expand a little bit here in Europe? I mean, I certainly think there is a market here for you.
It's something that I've thought about for a long time. And I do think that it's something that I would be definitely open to. I always look at the comments. We always laugh at the office that, we read the comments, and whether they're good or bad or they're just really tearing us down, I take it as good feedback. And just the fact that people are really engaged with the Cut. It's not a passive publication. It really is a publication that is engaged with its readers. And so it's not a simple just scroll past it. We don't care about this. We do really get people passionate telling us what they feel about the Cut and New York Magazine at large. And so it's something that I've definitely thought about, and I want to make sure that we're always in connection and have a closeness with our reader. And so it's something that I'm simmering on it.
That's very good to hear as a fan here. And going back to the issue that is out now in the newsstands, the print edition of the Cut. I mean, there are 3 covers, and you literally chose the 3 hottest pop stars in the planet right now: Doechii, Bad Bunny, and Rosé. I mean, it's incredible. Very different styles, but they're cool, right?
Very cool. I think for me, though, it is that, so much of what we do is rooted in how can we be inclusive and diverse in this space, but then also do things that are really unexpected, do things that people wouldn't, normally do for a fashion issue, or that they would only kind of go in one way, and we wanted to present the reader with something different. And so I really love that we're able to spend a lot of time on this issue in the way of finding the right talent, and the talent that I think is also just super vocal and making waves in a different way. And it's been exciting to kind of see this come together, and we're already thinking about what we're going to do for September.
Oh, and I look forward. And how do you work with David Haskell? I remember talking to him, I think it was 2019. It's been a while, but he was a lovely guy to chat to. What's your relation with him?
Yeah, I mean, he's the best. And I think that I'm really, really fortunate to be able to look up to him, but also just be able to work with him. And he's obviously incredibly intelligent, and the magazine does just the best work. But I really, he's really been formative in helping me kind of figure out what the brand DNA of the Cut is, and how we continue to build that audience, and how we continue to grow the brand in a way that is sustainable. I think oftentimes, there's always a new trend in media. I remember, many years ago when people were like, pivot to video, pivot to podcasts, all the things. And he's been such a supporter of the Cut, but also a supporter, and just, I think, supporter of me just figuring out the ways in which we want to expand that actually feel right and intentional, and not just, let's just grow.
One article that I cannot wait, because I am, I like to wait for my print edition to arrive, is the astrology one. I think, and I think that's why I like the Cut as well, because you guys know how to have fun as well.
Yes.
There are serious topics, but you're not po-faced, if I may say that.
Yeah. I think it's always a balance for us. And I think, when we make these issues, but also I think every day on the site, I want it to be a journey for the reader. I don't want them to feel like it's one note. We are constantly updating the homepage. Our site is definitely alive, and I want it to feel that way. But then I also want the print issue to also feel that way. And there'd be things that you may read right away, and then there may be things that you read, a few days later, or, when you're about to go on a trip and you have some time at the airport. I want it to feel like it's actually, you're going on an adventure with the reader. And so I like to mix it up, and, we have some new rubrics in this, and we'll try some for September, but I don't want it to just be strictly what you usually get from a typical fashion magazine.
And of course, it's called New York Magazine. How is New York today? How do you see? Do you still feel a lot of excitement about the city when it comes to its media scene, fashion scene, culture? Are you kind of a very pro New York person?
Oh yeah, no, I love it here. I mean, I'm originally from Wisconsin, so more Midwest. But this is where I plan to live for the rest of my life. And I think that, it's a beautiful place to live, but also it is just really dynamic. And it is, always at the forefront of culture and conversations. And I think further to that point, I think the magazine just does an incredible job of always staying on top of that because there's always something big happening here. And I think the pace of the news has definitely sped up in the past few years, but it's been interesting to watch and also be part of at the same time.
And finally, one more question, Lindsay, for you, because I know you're also the co-founder of Black in Fashion Council. I just wonder if you can tell us a bit more about that work. And in a way, as being an editor, I mean, it makes you so powerful to actually implement some of that change.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I'm super grateful to be in a leadership role, but I also want to always make sure that I'm being a ladder for other people and that I'm using whatever platform or power that I have to help other people. And so Black in Fashion Council was started a few years ago during pandemic and George Floyd timing and a lot of things happening in the world where it felt like we've had a lot of conversations around DEI and not much was really changing. And I think that, that's true now more than ever. We need a lot of efforts and support around DEI and just helping Black designers and creatives. And so we've done a lot of partnerships with brands, but just to further propel Black creatives in the industry who need support or resources and help. And so we celebrated our 10th season this past February during our Fashion Week, in which we did a dinner, which is just like our community dinner for just to thank everyone in the industry who's been so supportive and helpful and loving. And we had a showroom with 10 designers just to be able to get them access to press. And we did a TV run with them locally here to be able to get them to meet different editors and buyers and get them in different stores, et cetera. It's completely free to the designers. And we just want to actually make it a space where they can get some help and a little bit of notoriety that they wouldn't be able to without, a little bit of the push of New York Fashion Week, et cetera. And yeah, it's always been important to me to really help other people. And so it's the very least that I could do.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. And the latest issue of The Cut is out now in the US, or you can check their work at thecut.com and nymag.com. And now we look at the world of property. For Monocle's new March issue, we've compiled our very own property survey, where we spoke with different developers, we looked at buildings that make a neighborhood special, and more. To preview all that, the man, in fact, who worked closely on the survey, our executive editor, Christopher Lord.
Look, we have to remember real estate property, it is, frankly, and we can't get away from it, it is what makes the money go around the world. It is what powers so much of our economies. The view of a lot of property developers is that they are, frankly, looking to cut corners as much as they can to get the biggest returns on the lowest what they put into it. And actually, that view, if we look all around the world, especially cities that are growing very quickly, it's easy to come to that view. It's easy to see property development as a business that is dominated by people who are willing to, frankly, squeeze the most out of the lemon. But actually, if you find the right developers, which is what I've tried to do here, and the writers that I worked with on the survey, try and find those buildings that are thinking about the neighborhood around them. I think that was the kind of guiding light for this survey, is sort of the way property is moving in the best possible sense. It might not be necessarily what absolutely driving the market forward, but what is, frankly, raising the bar, raising the value, are those developers who see buildings as part of a neighborhood and think about the area around them and can sort of take the building as an engine of commerce, an engine of street life, job creation, community building, all those things that are really, really important, rather than just a box for people that you sell.
Absolutely. And it's not just about good design, although good design is important, of course. We're Monocle. And you start your property survey that you compiled with some examples of those buildings, right? We have an aquatic community center in New Westminster and many others as well. Very international selection.
Absolutely, yeah. And look, one of the things, you mentioned there, Monocle is about design. What I tried to do in the sort of selection of these and the kind of the various pitches that I got from writers was try and surprise you a little bit, in as much as, not all of this looks we have certain sort of design notes that I think are very familiar to anybody who knows Monocle about the kind of architecture that we write about. And that is great. And Nick Manise is not going to change that, I think, in his design section. But what I've tried to do here is surprise you a little bit, whether that's in terms of materials, color. There's a great big building here that's just recently opened in Hong Kong in the CBD that was designed by Zaha Hadid shortly before she died. And this thing, in a way, is sort of a little bit out of our world. It's big, it's got a glass exterior, but also it resembles an orchid flower. It's got these mad, almost, in a very Zaha Hadid way, these kind of very organic, almost like biological forms in the interior, in the lobby, in the hallways, in the elevators and escalators. It's got all these sort of design notes that you associate with Zaha Hadid. It's not typical Monocle fare to write about a building that's so outrageous like that. But actually, somehow here it kind of works because, as we talk about in the piece, that particular building is almost responding, even unintentionally in a way, to some of the challenges that Hong Kong has had in recent years about office vacancies. So they made a statement. They made something that was a kind of beacon, if you like, of trying to get people back to the financial district, the CBD of Hong Kong, which is essentially where the city's fortunes all emerge from. So we go from buildings like that, as I say, quite outrageous, to more sort of, frankly, just because of their beauty, but also their functionality. A great project just finished by David Chipperfield in Lyon on the confluence of two rivers there. A really interesting piece that's shows you as well how important social housing is becoming in the way that a lot of developers who are smart are thinking about. But then the one I just want to pick out as well, which is just, I'm really glad we got it in, was our writer in Singapore, Joseph Koh. He went to a development in Chinatown, an old neighborhood filled in Bangkok with these very beautiful old kind of mixed-use buildings. They're very old. A lot of these things are sort of several generations old. But they have sort of retail on the ground floor and then sort of residential up at the top. And a family, 4 siblings, inherited their ancestral home. And rather than sort of just, open it up to anybody and make the money out of it and, leave it to kind of be, they said, well, this neighborhood needs a bit of a new think to it. So why don't we make it a bit of a sort of game changer? And so they renovated it, first of all. So it's like beautiful old building, very nice staircases, very tropical interiors, lots of tiling and everything, beautifully restored. But then they also brought in businesses that you couldn't find anywhere else in Chinatown, specifically in terms of dining and hospitality. And as a result, what's happened, you speak to people from Bangkok, and Chinatown at the moment there is going through this amazing moment where there's so much interest in it, partly because a lot of it is very old buildings, it's got a lot of character. But these guys were kind of there in a very early moment for that. And I think it's not untrue to say that, in a way, they kicked off that sort of rethinking of what Chinatown could be with that building.
And Chris, we hear and listen to so many urbanism horror stories, but that's what I liked about the property surveys. There are no horror stories in there. And there's one about Arizona, very interesting, kind of a residential complex, right? And the reason I picked on the story, because you would imagine Arizona in the US, car is king there. But I think this complex is quite different. It's trying to do something new.
Yeah, that's so true, Fernando. It's right. The sort of best ideas kind of emerge in the most unlikely places in a way. But yes, Arizona, we think of it is a place dominated by, big roads, big highways. It's a desert place. So you need a car to get around. Well, not according to one development there called Cul-de-sac, which is now sort of, I think, about a quarter finished. Tom Vanderbilt, our correspondent, sent a great piece from there. He actually visited this development. And according to the guy who founded it, Ryan Johnson, he says essentially it's the first car-free neighborhood built from scratch in the United States, which is obviously quite a big claim. And apart from a small car park where you can essentially rent a kind of ride shares from, he says there's not a drop of asphalt on the whole development. The point being that, what they've tried to create there is a development that's plugged into local transport, that's got all you need on site in terms of a multitude of businesses, whether that's, things like hairdressers and groceries, but also places to hang out, places to gather, gyms and so on, all in this neighborhood. The way it's been designed is there's small kind of paths, and you can see some of the architecture. It has this like vaguely sort of desert modern or Mykonos style sort of white buildings with colourful doors and so on. What they've tried to create, in a sense, is something that's not an island. They're not trying to think of like a kind of gated community, rather a place that's plugged into the main city, Phoenix, but not via the car, that's via the rail links that are there, it's light rail links. Is it perfect? I think Tom's sort of conclusion from it is that it's a lovely idea. The trouble is what they've done is got lots of exemptions from the ways that most US cities have to expand, which is, they have to provide frankly, too much parking for cars as part of every new development. That's just written into the building codes for many, many US cities. These guys managed to get an exemption, frankly, because it was a bit of a test bed. But I think what he also says is this does create the space. The fact that it's so popular, the fact that it's, as far as they've built now, more or less full, and it has eventually will be home to about 1,000 residents. The fact that that has happened shows you that there is this kind of pent-up demand in the United States for that kind of living, which, you know, the way they frame it is they got European-style living. Well, can we really call it that? I don't know. Many of us, when you look at it from the outside, would say, well, what's the big deal? It's, you know, you can't drive cars down the main road. You've got to understand in the US, that's pretty revolutionary. It's pretty unusual. So it's a really interesting piece. And I think that the conclusion that anyone can draw from it, and we do aim this at developers a little bit, the conclusion that they can take from it is, well, if I'm going to be building in the US, huge market, maybe I need to be thinking a little bit more about the way that the demand is changing. More people don't want to rely on their cars.
And finally, Chris, because I thought a very interesting report you did, because you visited BAU, which is this kind of convention with builders, architects in Munich. And I think that's why I think we like kind of a good trade fair, because you meet people, you talk to them, they're all reunited in the same space. How was it at BAU?
BAU was
Did you become are you now a property expert?
Well, BAU is a strange thing because it is aimed at developers and property people, but actually it's like the nuts and bolts of how buildings get built. So, you know, it's in Munich, it's in the big convention center there. It's like, I think that's like 12 hangar-sized buildings, huge cavernous spaces, and each one is actually dedicated to like a different material or a different facet of a home. So you have like one hangar dedicated just to aluminium, one hangar dedicated just to glass, to surfaces, to tiles, all that sort of, and it's like it's exhausting, and it's an extraordinary thing because it is packed out. And as I talk about in the piece, you know, there's a kind of Oktoberfest atmosphere when you're there. You know, at 9 a.m, everyone's got steins out and drinking, and there's a kind of it shows you first of all how big Germany's construction sector is. I mean, you know, that country right now is going through some travails economically, but its backbone is so about these tradespeople who are still so much a big part of what keeps that, you know, big economic engine of Europe going. But what you do come away from it is, you know, it's a great place to get original ideas. And actually, some of the smartest ideas I saw weren't coming from Western Europe. There was a great example, Stora Enso, which is historically paper makers in Finland. And they have come up there as people use paper less and they're trying to get away from the kind of, you know, sort of resource heavy packaging and so on. Increasingly, their big business is trying to get more developers to work with wood, which frightens a lot of builders and developers off and architects off, because they're like, oh my God, you know, there's so many rules that you have to follow when you're building with wood around load bearing columns and all that kind of stuff. All quite stuff that is a sort of trade in itself, kind of business in itself. So they've come up with this almost like the barest kind of idiot-proof guide for how to build a house out of wood, how to incorporate wood into your thing. And it's like, it boils it down to this like really simple kit. I'm not saying that I could necessarily follow it, Fernando, but if you're an architect, you kind of know what you're doing with it. And, you know, so that was super interesting. As I say, they're coming from Finland. And then just one more I want to say, which maybe, I know, Fernando, you're a connoisseur of the you know, the swimming pool and the kind of play. You like to sort of get yourself around a swimming pool, certainly when the sun starts shining. But there's a great brand out of Holland, out of the Netherlands, which called Grip Factory, and they have found a way that you can treat ceramics with this chemical. It doesn't remain on it. You just wash it straight off. What the chemical does is it creates tiny, tiny holes in the surface of the ceramics, which are completely naked, unseen to the naked eye. And it means you can physically walk up ceramic tiles that have got water running over them, so wet tiles. So it means you could have, you know, essentially you won't fall over on a slippery surface. And they're doing them in, I mean, apparently the guy was telling me in Australia, it's like revolutionised the pool industry in Australia. But they're also doing now oil rigs and medical facilities, all these places where water is around, where you need ceramic tiles. I was just like, as I say, it's nuts and bolts of building, but who knew it was out there?
Thank you very much, Chris. And Monocle's March issue is out now. And finally, for more Monocle content, Monocle's annual travel magazine, The Escapist, is also out now. The title will take you to Galicia, Eastern Thailand, and more. For this issue, I wrote about a brand new hotel in my home city of São Paulo, the beautiful Pulso Hotel. Here's my conversation with the hotel owner, Otávio Suriani.
I feel São Paulo is, I would say, probably one of the best cities in two things, nightlife and restaurants. I've been around, I've lived abroad, I lived in Paris for a couple of years, and it's in few places of the world that you can enjoy the diversity of options that you have here in terms of gastronomy, and with brilliant chefs, brilliant restaurateurs. São Paulo is becoming very attractive for this. The nightlife is it's crazy. It's a city that never sleeps. You have options all night long. São Paulo was 100 years ago an industrial center. As it happened to all the industrial centers, or I would say the big cities of big countries, they started shifting from industrial places to service places. So São Paulo became a service hub. For example, financial services, of course, education, hospitals. We have like hospitals that are among references all around the world. So São Paulo has all these different aspects of interest. Culture, we have a very interesting gallery scene, the museums that we have here. So if you weight it and you see, well, São Paulo kind of has it all. It has hospitality now with nice hotels and fine hotels, gastronomy, culture, art, and business, of course, as we always had. But it's every day becoming more of a destiny for Brazilians and foreigners. And it changed a lot in the past 10 years. I remember when I started working, the average occupancy rate on weekends were like 30%, 20%. It was horrible, it was depressing. Nowadays, it's quite common to have a hotel 60, 70, 80% occupied on weekends, which would be unthinkable 10 years ago. People are changing their minds about Brazil, about São Paulo, because São Paulo is a very dynamic and interesting city, for me, I think.
And you mentioned restaurants there. I mean, that's an amazing to get Bistro Charlot, because it's a place that has a strong DNA in the city. It's been going on for about 30 years. And how was the conversation to bring it to the hotel? I mean, that's a really, really interesting one.
I would say a lot of people has some kind of attachment to Charlot because of family histories, because it's very traditional here in the city. I remember I was telling Charlot the other day that I remember when I used to go there in his restaurant, which was 2 blocks away from my parents' house when I was a kid. I used to go there with my grandfather. He would ask, for his shrimps or his filet. I would ask for my steak tartare. We would dine there, just me and him or the family. And I like amazing memories that I have of Charlot and my grandfather. So we knew each other, but when we decided to go forward with the development, we sensed that we would have to have someone that was really willing to rethink his positioning, because Charlot also did a very nice work of, repositioning its menu, its clients, and they really loved the idea. Charlot and Felipe, his partner, they embraced with a lot of joy the idea of occupying these two corners at the hotel.
That's amazing. And you're talking about music. I presume you're a big fan of Brazilian music. There is a lovely bar, Sarau Bar, right?
It's our speakeasy, with low lights, good drinks. On Tuesdays, we have Romulo Frois, which is a producer and musician here in Brazil. He rates some relevant contemporary Brazilian artists. So it's been amazing. A lot of great artists been here in the past months. Dora Morelembal has been here. Who else? Nausetti, Meta Meta. Well, great artists, great, amazing Brazilian artists. And on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, it kind of becomes like it's not a listening bar, but we have good selectors, good DJs that put some nice and enjoyable music on. We have a very powerful German sound system, which is very good and it's comfortable, it's nice to hear. And it's interesting because sometimes on Saturdays, people start to get excited and it booms a bit, it gets nice, the vibe on the bar.
Thank you very much, Otávio, and the new issue of The Escapist is out now. And that's it for this week's show. My thanks as ever to our editor, Jack Juras. Any comments or queries, feel free to write to me, Fernando, at fp@monocle.com. And remember, we're back next Saturday at 10 a.m. London time. And meanwhile, you can always listen again at monocle.com or subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also subscribe to Monocle Magazine on our website. You've been listening to The Stack. I'm Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.